sports wherever you may be. Welcome back for another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. Join your host, Bill Alvstad, and co-host, sports writer and football analyst Keith Myers as we talk Seahawks football. Seahawks fans, welcome back to another edition of the Seahawks Playbook Podcast. I'm your host, Bill Alvstad, sitting down again with Mr. Keith Myers. How's it going, Keith?
Oh, I like that intro. I'm doing good. It's got that post-holiday thing going on where I've had a lot of sugar and
I'm growing something on my face, and I refuse to shave because it's just too much trouble.
Yeah.
You know, it's that time of the year where
it is.
There's no other public appearances other than to your own family, and they love you no matter what. So
and this show, there's that.
Yeah.
Because we are, we do post this on YouTube now, so everyone gets to look at us. So, but anyways, so let's Seahawks.
So let's talk. Let's talk Seahawks football for a while,
lost,
and then we'll have some fun.
Yeah. They lost a game they should have never lost. It was absolutely terrible. They lost by 1 point because the defense decided not to stop anyone. They had a 10-point lead with 7-something left in the game, missed a field goal, which would have put them up by 13. And then the defense decided to stop playing and gave up to
Nick Foles.
Gave up 11 points, including a 2-point conversion, and
well over 100 yards in the last 7 minutes, and 2 scoring drives and 1 2-point conversion, and there you go.
Yep.
It's just one of those deals where it almost exemplifies the entire season in the last quarter. Time of possession was completely lopsided. The offense had some early success and then couldn't do anything. I texted you, at the last drive there where there's a minute to go, a couple of timeouts. We need to get, flip the field about 35 yards in order to get in a position where we need a field goal. And I said, this is one of the most least confident times that I've had in years where I just don't feel like they can finish the game.
And they haven't been able to finish all season.
And sure enough, you put Russell Wilson in any conversation with any great finisher that we've had in the last 10 years in this league, and there's just nothing there. And I thought, man, that's just the whole season right there. Yeah. And it's so frustrating because we are clearly a better team with the inability to finish both offensively and defensively is tough. I mean, I can understand why fans feel so frustrated. It really is frustrating.
Yeah, it's extremely frustrating. So there were two things that came out of the game that I took away from this. One is that this game really demonstrated how much the time of possession problem is on the defense, because the Seahawks did a good job of moving the ball. They got a bunch of third down conversions. They were taking what the defense gave them instead of going everything big play. They ran the ball really effectively. Rashad Penny, and my second take is that Rashad Penny actually looks like a running back that you could use. And this has been the first time he's got about half as many total yards in the last 4 games as he has in his entire career before that. So he's like 900.
Yeah, he was actually just fun to watch in this game. A fun running back with a lot of upside, a lot of potential. Any other teams out there, not named the Seahawks, are probably looking at free agency going, we could give that guy a 1 or 2 year deal and he could come out and see if it works for us as well. The other thing to think about too is Seattle is in the same boat. If Rashad Penny wants to stick around for another year, I think the Seahawks would be wise at least to throw him a 1 year deal to see if he can stay on the field and prove it and help the Seahawks out next year. I think it would be a win-win for both the player and the team.
Yep.
So we'll just see.
The Penny Dallas combination is working. And
I'd like to have the Carson Penny combination I wouldn't mind having both those guys back. Now, Chris Carson is under contract next year. We'll see how that plays out as far as the cap space and so forth.
He's but just not healthy.
He's not healthy, and the neck might prevent him from playing anyway. We'll have to wait and see.
But anyway, so I interrupted myself with my second point before I finished my first point. The first point is that the offense did what it needed to do. It ran the ball. It had strung together drives. It had third down confusions, and the overall time of possession was still skewed very hard to the Bears because the defense simply couldn't get off the field on third down. Just over and over and over again. They were great on first and second down and then gave up the third down conversion. And it just happened repeatedly. And the Bears were able to hold onto the ball for way too long. This defense just can't get off the field. And that's a scheme problem. It's also in places a talent problem, but it's also a scheme problem. They're playing way too soft and it's hurting them.
And before the game, you in your brain, you're wanting to say, well, we're a better team than Chicago. But the fact of the matter is we're 5-10.
Yeah.
We're 5-10. We're 5-10 for a reason. And the reason is defense, while statistically points scored against them is pretty above average. Everything else, though, is below average on the defense.
The quote, bend but don't break, doesn't work when you're bending so far. They're getting down, into the red zone on these 12 play, 10 play drives that last 6 minutes, 8 minutes, 10 minutes. And then, you say you hold them to a field goal. Great. But your offense hasn't been on the field. And at the end of the game, you've been on the field as a defense for so long, you've got nothing left in the tank. You've got to be able to get off the field. Bend but don't break means that, you do give up some yards, but you give up yards from, 25 to the 50.
Yes.
Or to the 40, and then you force a punt or a long field goal try, or whatever. You don't give up yards from the 5 all the way down to the 5 over 10 minutes, and then finally, decide you want to play defense. And that's what the Seahawks defense does, is they just cannot get off the field. But anyways, that's not what today's show is about. Today's show, we're so over the 2021 season.
Bingo.
That we have decided that this week's show is going to be our first look at mock drafts. And Bill and I have each done our own mock draft, looking ahead to next year, because this is a team where the season is over. The season has been over, but now it's one of those things.
It's statistically, mathematically over at this point.
Yeah, so they've been eliminated from the playoff push. So these last couple games mean nothing for the team other than the possibility of playing, spoiler, for Arizona. But
so we might as well have some fun.
Yeah,
might as well have some fun. And there's so much time now to speculate, to talk about coaching, to talk about players, to talk about Russell Wilson, to talk about all of it, that we thought we'd just throw it out this week and start with a little bit of fun, some off-season meanderings as far as player needs, team needs, etc. We kind of know what we're going to have to face. We've got free agency coming up. A number of players are off contract now. So we've got that component. We've got the NFL draft, which is coming up the last weekend of April. Before that, we've got the combine, a few few bowl games to evaluate, East-West Shrine, Senior Bowl, and then all of the college football playoff type stuff and bowl games remaining this week and then after the first of the year. So there's a lot of evaluation opportunities between now and the draft. But this is our first mock 1.0. We've had some early looks, Keith, as far as our other NFL show is concerned, to look into a few position groups. So far, we've got a few, obviously, to go. But we've had a chance to kind of dig in a little bit as far as mock drafts are concerned. We've done a few privately, but this is the first one where we're going to kind of come out with one. You're coming out with yours. I'm coming out with mine. Let's take a look at yours first and just kind of go through it. We can go back and forth if you want, pick for pick. I did mine a little bit differently. I threw a trade in there. You did not.
I did not, simply for time purposes.
Yes. So why don't we just go through yours?
Yeah, let's do that.
And we can kind of take a look at it and run through them pick by pick and why you did what you did.
Okay, so if we were to look at mine, so I did not trade anything. I just went with the picks that Seahawks have now, which only gave me 6 picks. And John Snyder's not going to do that. There'll be some trades that'll happen. There'll be some moving around. There might also be some players traded in order to acquire more draft capital here. And so we'll kind of see what happens. But I just used their picks as they had. And looking at this, it should be no surprise what I did. I went after the trenches, which is where the Seahawks need the most work, specifically offensive line. And then I also looked at cornerback because I thought this team, obviously needs some help back there because they've Trey Brown after the patellar tendon injury. You don't know what he's going to be like next year. And so they need a starter opposite DJ Reed, and they need some depth. I mean, I like what Sidney Jones has done this year, and Bless Austin and company have proven to be okay as the season has gotten further in and they've gotten more acclimated. But I still think they need a top corner. So I started this draft with Sean Ryan, offensive tackle out of UCLA, big guy, strong guy, absolute mauler as a run blocker, but also has the quick feet and ability to set the edge and be that blindside left tackle. There was a lot of talk preseason that this guy might be a top 10 pick. And he hasn't quite lived up to that. And so he slid. A lot of mock drafts have him going in the teens or low 20s. In the one that I did here on the NFL mock draft database simulator had him dropping. And so when he was there at 40, it was like a really easy selection to take him. And so, he's left tackle of the future. And I think with the emergence of Jake Curran on the other side, that gives you 2 solid tackles and 1 developmental guy that can be your swing tackle for next year in Stone Forsythe, and with an opportunity to challenge Curran on the right end and see what happens there. So I really liked that. Start there. Go with the young tackle to replace Brown, who's on a whose contract is ending, and really kind of solidify that offensive line with 2 new tackles going into next year. So that was my first pick. After that, I went Kyler Gordon out of Washington. He's a little on the short side for what we would think of as a prototypical Seattle corner at only 6 foot. But if you look at Trey Brown and DJ Reed, the Seahawks have kind of ended that prototype. But he gives the Seahawks a guy with good quickness, good coverage ability, rather than being, the big, strong guy that can, that jams the receiver at the line and plays with length. Instead, he plays with actual, ability to shadow and cover and be really sticky in coverage the way that DJ Reed and Trey Brown have been, but with a little bit more height. After that, you and I just talked about Seahawks have a lot of question marks at running back. Penny has never stayed healthy until the last couple of games. Carson's never stayed healthy. Penny's also a free agent. Who knows what they're going to do. So I started looking at what can the Seahawks do at running back, and I ended up settling on Rashad White out of Arizona State, which is kind of a weird pick for the Seahawks, given that he is almost a wide receiver in terms of his talent set. I mean, you can line him up at wide receiver, you can move him around, you can place him anywhere. But given the offense, and given if Shane Waldron was running this offense, they want a guy that can be more versatile, do more things in the passing game. And that's what Rashad White is. He's got the size and ability to run between the tackles, run outside, all those things. But he's not the pure power back that you're used to seeing in Seattle, like a Chris Carson, who's going to run a lot of people over. Instead, he's going to make more people miss. he's got the size and power to do some of those things, but it's not entirely his game. He's more shifty, better catcher, still has the ability to run inside. So there, and then after that, Jarrett Patterson at Notre Dame. He's a center. I think he's going to take a year to develop, but if you're already going with
I like that pick.
A rookie and another, first year starter as your two tackles, you may not want to start a rookie at center also. And so giving Patterson a chance to come in and develop for a few weeks before inserting him into the starting lineup is kind of the path there. And that gives them, right? That's a running back and two offensive linemen in my first four picks, right? So you can see where my view on this was. And then I shift over to the defensive line and pick up a defensive tackle in Christopher Hilton. He's a guy that is kind of nose tackle-ish. It's going to remind people a little bit of Jerron Reed. And when he was the first couple of years, when he was the nose tackle before Poona Ford pushed him over into the 3-tech. And so he's going to come in and fit right into that mix with him and Poona Ford. We'll make a great combination on the interior there. And then finally in round 7, I wrapped up with the tight end in Derek Deese, who's more of a pass catching, long armed guy with really soft hands. And I know the Seahawks already have 3 tight ends that they like, but it's the 7th round, and that's where I had a hard time finding guys that I liked that were still available. So I went with another tight end, which is another, guy that plays on the line of scrimmage. Again, you can see where I see that Seattle's weaknesses are in the trenches. So so that was my draft as I roll through that as fast as I could.
That's funny. Well, you didn't have to go that fast.
Now I'm out of breath, and it's your turn to talk. So let's show everybody your draft here, Bill, and start with your trade and what you did there.
Okay. Well, I'm gonna hold on now.
Hold on.
Yeah.
Why? Hold on.
I'm making an even different graphic because then I can show both of them together, and I'll add that.
Just put yours up and start talking.
Okay. So this is mine.
All right.
Okay. And I had a trade. I went ahead and moved back a little bit in my mock because I felt like I had, 3 or 4 guys that were on my list at 40 that I figured could, by dropping back just 4 or 5 picks, I could still have 2 or 3 that were remaining there. I was like you, Keith, in the fact that I believe that we need to build this team on the inside out, in the trenches on both sides of the ball. But the draft does take place after free agency. So I think I was counting on filling a couple of those holes in my free agency class. So I traded back, picked up number 45 overall from the Atlanta Falcons, pick number 113 overall, and pick 151 as well. So picked up a couple extra picks from dropping down just once.
Yeah, you only dropped down 5 spots, and you picked up 113 and 151. Those are valuable spots. Just outside the top 100 and just outside the top 150. And so you're going to get some good players there.
And I wanted to solve the problems that you wanted to solve, but I couldn't ignore the value that was on the board here. In my view, probably the best running back in the class, as it fits the Seahawks' current offensive scheme.
Yes,
and that would be Isaiah Spiller out of Texas A&M. Big body guy, thick frame, patience, vision, physical runner. So, to me, we've been lacking that over the last couple of years, not because Chris Carson doesn't run that way when he's available and on top of his game. It's that he's not available and he's not on top of his game. We haven't really seen the ideal Chris Carson Seahawks running back for a couple of years. And we've just now seen Penny in the last 4 or 5 games emerge as somebody that shows that the opportunities have been there in our offense with no running backs to be able to take advantage of that as far as being healthy. So Isaiah Spiller comes in, fills that big need, big void that's been there for a while to come and run between the tackles for presumably at this point, but we just don't know. Pete Carroll offense, Shane Waldron's offense, help Russell Wilson allow the team to really operate the way that it's most effective, which is a great running game.
Seahawk fans are going to
well, I picked up a couple of picks, and it's mid-second round, so it's not like it's a first-round pick, right? Yeah. It's definitely a position of need, and what I've seen with picks like Jonathan Taylor and Derrick Henry out there, guys that really truly do make a difference in the NFL for their respective teams, end up going in this range. They just do. And Isaiah Spiller is one of those players I think is going to be around the league for a while. If he remains healthy, a guy that can really make a difference for you as a 3-down back in the NFL. And the Seahawks need that. Yeah. Next pick, I went ahead and moved inside of the trenches. Jackson Kirkland, offensive tackle out of Washington, was there. I think he's a ready-made pass blocker on the left side. He's going to need some work building some functional strength in the NFL to become a road grader type guy. But they need that protection on the left side. Brown is likely moving on in the offseason. Seattle needs to upgrade that spot. Maybe they do, maybe they don't. Take care of that in free agency. Jackson Kirkland is sitting there, best value on the board at that spot. And for my third pick, I went with Henry To'o out of Alabama. He's their current middle linebacker, but he has a skill set that looks like he might be able to transition as a kind of a weak side guy. Still off the ball, tremendous sideline to sideline speed. He's just a really good football player, and so he was the best value on the board at that point.
With picking another our off line of scrimmage linebacker, where you've already got,
I did back to back too. And the only reason I did Channing Tindall as well, who's a linebacker in Georgia's scheme, is A, he's from Georgia, and B, he was the best player available on my board still at that point. And there really wasn't anybody else. And I didn't want to create another trade. This is one of the weak points on my draft, and why I ended up not liking my draft very much after I finished was because of this situation. Because essentially To'o and Tindall are the same player. But I thought there's a chance that we are moving on possibly from Bobby Wagner. One of these two or Jordan Brooks could take over the middle in Seattle's defense, and the other of the two could end up being on the weak side and or the strong side, just depending on how it all washes out for these guys. I thought I'd bring them in. They're uber athletic, both of them, with tons of speed. I didn't think that you could go wrong with at least bringing in the speed on these two guys and the football intelligence, especially from Tindall. He's just a very smart and instinctual player on the best college football defense in football.
So I was going to ask if you thought either of them could play strong side, because that's where they need the body. And if they do move on from Bobby Wagner, you've now got probably Brooks moving into the middle, and then you've got these guys being the two outside.
Yes.
Outside.
And
guys.
I would say Tindall probably has the better skill set to do that.
Interesting.
Better guy in coverage, dropping back into coverage and rushing the passer as well.
Yeah, that's a lot of athleticism between Brooks and those two guys at linebacker.
Yes, we would definitely be the most athletic linebacker group in the NFL if these two ended up in heavy rotation. Riley Moss was the pick overall at 113, cornerback out of Iowa. He's a very scrappy, physical corner at I think 6'1", 195. He's got a little bit of room on his frame. Probably the best corner in his conference, and one of the best corners in the league as far as just being a physical sea hockey kind of cornerback. He's got a little bit of length to him. He doesn't run. He's not tremendously speedy, but he's a very good tackler overall. Plays press and zone equally well. Good value at that point. Mafi, the edge defender out of Minnesota, is a value pick at that point. One of the best edge defenders remaining on the board, and a good special teams value. Sven Banks, I thought is another great corner to have at that point in the draft. We're loading up the defensive backfield for the Seahawks in this offseason, and he's just another body to throw in there to compete for one of those 5 spots that the Seahawks definitely need. And then Christian Watson is one of those guys that I thought would be a good value just to develop at the end of the draft, and that's why I picked him up.
Yeah, it's hard to, especially at this point in our draft prep time, to find players that we know and like at 223. We're just not that deep in our prep, so that makes that pretty hard. Interesting. You talked about wanting to load up in the trenches and fix that. You got 2 cornerbacks, 2 linebackers, and an edge defender, no interior defensive lineman, no interior offensive lineman.
I felt lucky to pick up 2 tackles in this draft. It's just the way that the board fell on my particular draft. I really kind of wanted to come out of there with your guy at center. I thought he's probably the 2nd or 3rd best center in this draft, and probably has an opportunity for whatever team drafts him to come in and play right away. He's got good experience there at Notre Dame, and they develop linemen really well there. So he's going to come in kind of ready-made, and I wanted to see if I could try to fit him in somewhere, and I did on a few other mocks that I created. This particular mock that I created, I just ran out of time. We were gonna record, and I was busy doing some other things, and I ended up settling on this one. And truly seems like I settled. It was one of those deals where I just felt like I'm just not quite happy with it. But it is what it is. It's the first.
Sometimes that's how the draft goes, though. Is you go into it looking for certain things, and you're just never in a position where the value is right to get the right player. And
I didn't want to spend a bunch of time trading. I didn't want to, because that's just not realistic. And so I kind of wanted to let the board come to me. And it's interesting because the domino effect happens. So by choosing Spiller, then and not an interior either defensive lineman or interior offensive lineman or the best tackle available on the board or whatever it is, the entire draft falls a certain way at that point. And that's what happened to me.
Yeah, because then you're stuck making sure that you got one of those players with your second pick, yes. when you got your tackle, and then it's like, okay, now you're down into the round 3 before you're really looking at, okay, what else is available.
Right.
And this is kind of what we ran into when we were doing mock drafts and stuff last year for Seattle, was that if they went and addressed offensive line in the first round, or their first pick, instead of Eskridge, and they went and they drafted the offensive lineman there, it seemed to open things up where they had more availability later, and more flexibility. But as we saw, when we didn't do that, and when the Seahawks didn't do that, and they went and drafted Eskridge, they
got stuck at cornerback then.
Yeah, because basically what happened was there was none of the players that could have come in and actually made an impact on the offensive line where they needed the help were still on the board.
Yep.
So they're like, okay, what's available? And so they went and got a cornerback, which they needed, and turned out to be a better player than I expected. And then they were all the way down in round 6 before they got their offensive lineman. And he was got the talent, but he's a massive project. And so
Yes.
it ends up you either get that player early, or sometimes it just doesn't fall to you get that second.
That's why I'm convinced, based on that process last year. And of course, we've been doing this for a long time. We kind of know how this works. It is a game, and it is a strategy, and so I absolutely guarantee that John Schneider and company are running, mock simulations all the time. And they're picking for all teams in all scenarios, and they follow these things very closely. And so they know how things are going to play out, give or take, in different scenarios over and over again. I mean, they just leave nothing to chance. I'm convinced that they do. Now, they may say they don't, and they, all that kind of stuff, but why wouldn't you? That would be my question. Why wouldn't you take advantage of doing some of these simulations so that you can have an idea of where things are at, especially if you go on to like NFL Mock Draft Database, where there's aggregated data, big boards, mock drafts. These things will get better over time, tighter, closer to where there's less and less left for chance. And so you kind of have an idea, give or take, on as large as this thing is, different scenarios are playing out in like a Monte Carlo scheme, where it's just right. You just kind of know at the end where things are going to kind of set up, and it turned out last year pretty decent, other than some risers and fallers that are outliers, for the most part. But everything else is kind of pegged in value areas of the draft that you can kind of follow.
Last year was also a weird year in terms of the COVID stuff, where there were a lot fewer games to scout for the scouts, and they couldn't do the in-person workouts and interviews. Everything was Zoom or nothing. And it's really difficult. Yeah. And so the Seahawks decided essentially to punt on the draft, and That's
exactly right, Keith.
They didn't make any trades. They traded away a lot of their picks. So we have 3 picks. They didn't make any trades during the draft. They just took players at those 3 positions, and they were like, they were going to get players that they liked. But the number of players that they liked, they had a good opinion on, were so few that they were like, yeah, we're just going to take these 3 players and get out of here. And that's so different than normal, where John Snyder's wants 9 or 10 selections in every draft.
How do you see that playing out this year?
Well,
it's back to kind of them trading back a few times to gain picks.
I don't know. They had a full college season in order to scout players. They're going to have, it looks like the combine is going to go on like normal. And so there's going to be some of the meetings and medical stuff and all that kind of stuff that's like normal. And what we don't know is if the league's going to put some restrictions on the in-person visits, but my guess is that they're not. And they're just going to tell teams, you be careful and take care of, if you invite someone in, make sure that everyone does their thing.
Put that new graphic up there too, just to that we can see our draft side by side.
I think it's going to be a more normal draft. I also think the Seahawks are going to be drafting in the upper portions of each round, which they're not used to. 40 is
true. Yes,
is where when they would trade back out of the back end of round 1, they would trade, from 28 or 29 down into the mid to late 30s, 40s, about that same spot. That's usually their target as they trade back. So are they going to trade back further like you did to 45? I don't know. I think more likely is that you're going to see that 71 become 75.
Well, look at so this side by side kind of gives you an idea of the value that you can pick up now. I probably end up picking up, an extra pick unrealistically. Maybe the 151 is unrealistic. Maybe that one kind of goes away, but you still add the 113 in there, and then the so I ended up with 1, 2, 3, 4, 8 picks. You had the native 6, so I have 2 additional picks. Is that worth 5 spots?
I don't know. It depends on if you're happy with Isaiah Spiller over Sean Ryan.
Mm-hmm.
I think you are, because you really like Spiller. I like Spiller. I don't want a running back in that spot. I want an offensive lineman. I want this team to stop having the terrible offensive line that's they've had.
No, if you can convince
years.
Me that Sean Ryan's our starting left tackle of the future for the next 8 years, absolutely.
I think he is. I think he's a guy who can pass block and has great feet, but you watch his tape and he is a mauler in the run game. So I think you put the two things together and you're like, all right, I can roll with that. Especially in Seattle. So you get a starting left tackle at 40 and not have to pick it in the top 10.
I would be tickled. I think
you have to do it.
Yeah. But he's a guy tickled with Spiller too, because I know the impact he would have on the team first year.
I also don't know how realistic it is that Ryan fell to 40. Mm-hmm. I did not. I mean, like I said, a lot of you see mocks where he goes as high as like 14.
Yeah, I've seen. I ran about 8 simulations this morning, and half of them he was there. There were half, where other players, would occasionally fall as well. It's just the nature of the mock draft simulator, or whether you put it in to be strict or aggressive or, a little easier on the trades or whatever. So it's fun either way. Anyway,
I always go strict and then realistic. So that way it stops me from ending up with, crazy drafts where you get players that are ranked in the top 10 down in the 50s and, trades where you
correct,
basically double your draft capital. That's not helpful. That doesn't help us learn about, the value of players and where they're going to go and any of that stuff. So I always put it on the most stringent, strict difficulties and then roll with it and see how that. Funny, you did 8 simulations this morning. I did 1.
I did
do 1 last night that I hated, mainly just because I was looking at all of these players that I hadn't scouted yet, and I was like trying to go through and scout on the run as I was doing it, and losing track of where I was in terms of in the draft because I'm too busy, looking at tape and that kind of stuff. And I'm like, I think I ended up with like 3 offensive tackled because I forgot that I had picked one earlier, and instead I thought I was going to get that defensive tackle, and then I changed my mind and got an offensive tackle, and then started looking, researching my next pick, and forgot that I'd made that switch. So there was that, and then so this morning I ran one what was much more like, let's just roll through it, draft the players that I know, research only a couple, and this is what I ended up with. So, which is also part of the reason why there's no trades, because I'm like, the trade aspect of it just
all right.
It introduces a lot of crazy.
What we need to do is we'll come back once a month. So we'll come back once a month. We'll do a mock. We'll throw it up there. Yeah. Why not? Well, because by the time we get to May or at the end of April, we'll be 5.0 by then.
Okay. It just feels like I'm like, God, only 1 mock a month, which I know normally for our show we usually do 1 or 2.
We do one. We do the mock draft show.
Yeah, the big mock draft show. But this is a different year. The team isn't playing into January, late January. We've been talking about the future of this team now for a month. And it's just a different year. The team's bad. It's not good. Big changes are coming one way or another, whether it be coach, quarterback, both, neither, but then a ton of the supporting cast.
So here's what we should do. Here's what we should do. This one is just kind of for practice, but we should have 2 more prior to the combine.
Okay.
So the combine this year is March 1st. I think is like the Thursday at the beginning of the combine kind of a thing. So in January, February, we need to at least have 2 more. So that way we have a post combine mock, which will be like the kind of the standard bearer there until the official draft, NFL draft. Because things change after the combine. So you've had the Senior Bowl, and the combine to have that data added to the mix. And so your mock drafts tend to become fairly steady at that point, for the most part. Anyway. All right, let's get out of here. Fun show. Thank you. It's better than talking about the team in the season. So we'll get back to that next week. Okay. So follow Keith on Twitter at Myers NFL. I'm at NW Seahawk. The show is at Hawks Playbook. SeahawksPlaybook.com is the website. You can find us on your favorite podcast app and YouTube, and make sure you subscribe. So until next time, go Hawks.
Go Hawks.
Seahawks Playbook Podcast listeners, thanks for joining us for another edition of the show. You can find us on Twitter. Bill is at NW Seahawk. Keith is at Myers NFL. And the show is at Hawks Playbook. You can listen and subscribe to the show at SeahawksPlaybook.com.